My mom took my room and gave it to my brother. 10 years later I sold the house. I still remember the exact moment my mother told me. I was 17 years old, sitting at the kitchen table in our house in suburban Cleveland, finishing my homework on a Thursday afternoon in late August. The summer heat was unbearable and the old ceiling fan barely moved the thick air around us. My mother walked in carrying a basket of laundry, her face showing that expression I had learned to recognize over the years. The one that meant she had already made a decision and nothing I could say would change her mind. "Daniel, we need to talk," she said, setting the basket down on the counter. My younger brother Marcus had just turned 13, and according to my mother he desperately needed his own space. He was going through that difficult teenage phase, she explained, and sharing a room with our youngest brother who was only 8 wasn't working anymore. The solution she had found was simple in her mind. I would move to the basement and Marcus would take my room. My room. The one with the window facing the backyard oak tree. The one where I had spent countless nights studying, dreaming about college, planning my future. The walls still had marks from the posters I had carefully hung over the years, and the closet held not just my clothes but memories of every important moment of my adolescence. I tried to reason with her. I explained that I was in my senior year of high school, that I needed a proper space to study for my SATs, that the basement was cold and damp, with tiny windows near the ceiling that barely let in any light. But my mother's mind was made up. "You're almost an adult, Daniel. You'll be going to college next year anyway. Marcus needs this now," she said, already walking away to continue with her chores. That was it. No discussion, no consideration for what I felt or needed. Just a decision handed down from above as if my feelings didn't matter at all. That weekend I moved my things to the basement. Box after box I carried down my books, my clothes, my desk, everything that made that room mine. My father helped silently, not meeting my eyes, while Marcus watched from the top of the stairs with an expression that wasn't quite guilt but wasn't triumph either. Something in between that made everything feel worse. The basement became my new reality. It smelled of mildew and old concrete, and at night I could hear the pipes groaning above my head. The small windows showed only the feet of people walking by on the sidewalk, a constant reminder that I had been pushed down literally and figuratively in my own home. School started 2 weeks later and I threw myself into my studies with an intensity one had never felt before. If my home wouldn't give me the respect and space I deserved, I would earn it elsewhere. I spent every moment I could at the public library, at friends' houses, anywhere but that basement. My grades, which had always been good, became excellent. I applied to every scholarship I could find, working part-time at a local grocery store to save money. The humiliation of that summer became fuel for something else. A burning desire to leave, to prove that I could build something better for myself, something that no one could take away from me. My mother never apologized. In fact, she seemed annoyed by my reaction, as if I was being dramatic about something insignificant. "You're being selfish," she told me once when I came home late from the library. "Family means making sacrifices." But I didn't see how giving up my room while Marcus got everything he wanted was about family. It felt like I was the only one being asked to sacrifice anything. My father remained neutral as he always did, unwilling to contradict my mother or stand up for me. That silence hurt almost as much as losing my room. The months passed slowly. Winter came and the basement became even colder. I could see my breath in the morning before the old heater finally kicked in. I studied by lamplight, wrapped in blankets, counting down the days until graduation. My college applications became my escape plan, each one a potential ticket out of that house. I applied to schools across the country, California, New York, Massachusetts, anywhere that would take me far away. When the acceptance letters started arriving in March, I opened them in private, not wanting to share those moments with my family. They felt too precious, too mine, to be celebrated in a place where I felt so unwelcome. I was accepted to a state university about 4 hours away, with enough financial aid and scholarships to make it possible. The day I got the letter, I sat on my basement bed and cried. Not tears of sadness but of relief. I was getting out. I was building a future that no one could take from me. That night at dinner I announced my plans. My mother seemed surprised that I had chosen a school so far away, as if she expected me to stay close, to continue being available for whatever the family needed. But I had learned my lesson. I couldn't build my life around people who saw me as disposable. College became my sanctuary, my fresh start, the place where I could finally be myself without feeling like I was constantly in someone else's way. I moved into the dorms in late August, exactly 1 year after losing my room, and I remember the overwhelming sense of freedom that washed over me as I arranged my belongings in that small dorm room. It was mine. Truly mine. No one could take it from me, no one could tell me I had to give it up for someone else's convenience. My roommate was a guy named Trevor from Boston, studying engineering like me, and we got along well enough to make that tiny space feel like home. I worked relentlessly during those college years. I had 3 part-time jobs at various points, tutoring other students, working at the campus bookstore and doing weekend shifts at a local coffee shop. The money wasn't just for spending. I was saving every dollar I could, building a financial cushion that represented something more than just numbers in a bank account. It represented independence, security, the promise that I would never again be at the mercy of someone else's decisions about my life. My grades remained excellent and I threw myself into my coursework with a dedication that impressed even my professors. I went home rarely during those years. Thanksgiving, maybe Christmas, but I always found excuses to cut the visits short. My mother would complain that I was becoming distant, that I was neglecting my family, but she never seemed to understand that the distance was necessary for me to heal. Every time I walked into that house, I felt myself becoming smaller, younger, less significant. The basement room remained my designated space during visits, and Marcus still occupied what I still thought of as my room, now decorated with his own posters and filled with his own things. He had grown into a typical teenager, absorbed in his own world, seemingly unaware of the resentment I still carried. My father and I would have stilted conversations about my studies, about career prospects, about everything except what really mattered. He never acknowledged what had happened, never admitted that perhaps they could have handled things differently. My mother continued treating me like I was being unreasonable, as if the passage of time should have erased my hurt feelings. But hurt doesn't work that way. It settles into your bones, becomes part of how you see the world, shapes your decisions in ways both obvious and subtle. During my junior year, I met Professor Richardson, a woman in her 50s who taught advanced structural engineering. She saw something in me beyond just a good student. She noticed the drive, the hunger to prove myself, and she took me under her wing. Through her guidance, I landed an internship at a respected architectural firm in Columbus. That internship turned into a job offer upon graduation, with a salary that seemed impossibly generous to someone who had spent years counting every penny. I was 22 years old, and for the first time in my life I felt truly stable, truly secure. I rented a small apartment in Columbus, a one-bedroom place with hardwood floors and large windows that let in beautiful natural light. I furnished it slowly, carefully, choosing each piece with intention. A comfortable bed, a proper desk, a bookshelf for my growing collection of engineering texts and novels. Every object in that apartment was mine by choice, not by default or by what someone else didn't want. I would sit in my living room in the evenings, looking around at this space I had created, and feel a sense of accomplishment that had nothing to do with my job or my degree. I had built this life myself, piece by piece, starting from that basement room where I had felt so powerless. The visits home became even less frequent. Once a year, maybe twice if guilt got the better of me. During one Christmas visit when I was 24, I overheard my parents talking in the kitchen. My father was worried about money, something about refinancing the mortgage, about bills piling up, about Marcus's college tuition coming due. My mother sounded stressed in a way I had rarely heard before. The house that had once seemed so solid, so permanent, was apparently becoming a burden they could barely manage. I felt a strange mix of emotions listening to that conversation. Not quite satisfaction, but something close to validation. The house they had prioritized over my feelings was now causing them stress. Marcus went to a local community college, living at home to save money. The irony wasn't lost on me that the brother who had gotten my room, who had been the favored child, was now stuck in the same house while I had built an independent life elsewhere. But I felt no real animosity toward Marcus himself. He had been a child when it happened, caught in the middle of our parents' decisions. The real issue had always been with how my mother had handled things, her complete disregard for my feelings, her expectation that I should simply accept being pushed aside. By the time I turned 26, I had been promoted twice at the firm. I was working on significant projects, making real money, building a career that gave me both professional satisfaction and financial security. I had dated a few people, though nothing serious had stuck yet. My life was full and purposeful, constructed entirely on my own terms. The resentment I had carried for so long had transformed into something else. Not forgiveness exactly, but a kind of detachment. That house, that family dynamic felt like it belonged to a different person's life, someone younger and more vulnerable than who I had become. The phone call came on a Tuesday afternoon in March, just as I was leaving a client meeting downtown. My mother's name flashed on my screen, which was unusual enough to make me pause. We hadn't spoken in almost 4 months, our communication having dwindled to occasional text messages and the obligatory birthday wishes. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. Her voice sounded different. Smaller, uncertain in a way I had never heard from her before. "Daniel, we need to talk about the house," she said, skipping any pretense of small talk. My father had lost his job 6 months earlier, she explained, and they had been living off savings and his unemployment benefits. They were 3 months behind on the mortgage and the bank had started foreclosure proceedings. Marcus was still living at home, working part-time while finishing his associate degree, but his contribution barely covered groceries. They had tried everything: loan modifications, payment plans, second mortgages, but nothing had worked. They were going to lose the house. I stood on the corner of Broad Street and High, watching people rush past me in their winter coats, and felt absolutely nothing. This house that had represented so much pain for me, that had been the symbol of my displacement and humiliation, was slipping away from my parents. My mother was calling me, I realized, because she needed something. After years of minimal contact, after making it clear through action and inaction that my feelings didn't matter, she was reaching out because she was desperate. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, my voice flat and professional, as if she were a client sharing bad news about a project. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear her breathing, could almost feel her working up to whatever request was coming. "We were wondering," she finally said, "if you might be able to help us. Maybe a loan or co-signing on a refinance. You're doing so well now, and we just need to get through this rough patch." The audacity of it hit me like a physical force. This woman who had dismissed my feelings so completely, who had made me feel unwelcome in my own home, was now asking me to save that same home. I thought about that basement room, about the cold nights studying by lamplight, about carrying my belongings down those stairs while Marcus claimed the space that should have been mine. I thought about every shortened visit, every stilted conversation, every moment of feeling like I didn't matter. "I can't do that, Mom," I said quietly. "I'm sorry, but I can't." She tried to argue, to appeal to family loyalty, to guilt me by bringing up everything they had done for me over the years. But I held firm. I had worked too hard to build my financial security to risk it on people who had never shown me the consideration I deserved. When she realized I wouldn't change my mind, her tone shifted from pleading to anger. "I was selfish," she said. "I was holding a grudge over something insignificant that had happened years ago. I was abandoning my family when they needed me most." I ended the call and stood there on that busy street corner, feeling shaken but also strangely liberated. I had finally said no to her, had finally put my own needs first without apologizing for it. That night in my apartment, I couldn't stop thinking about the house. Not with nostalgia or regret, but with a strange sense of opportunity. An idea had begun forming in my mind, one that felt both audacious and perfectly right. Over the next few weeks, I did research. I looked into the property value, the outstanding mortgage balance, the foreclosure timeline. I consulted with a real estate attorney and a financial advisor. The numbers were interesting. The house, despite my parents' financial troubles, was still worth significantly more than what they owed. It was in a neighborhood that had appreciated considerably over the past decade. With my savings and my solid credit, I could actually afford to buy it. The idea crystallized into a plan. I would purchase the house from my parents before the foreclosure went through. They would avoid the devastating credit impact of a foreclosure, and I would own a piece of property that could serve as either an investment or a rental. It was a business transaction, clean and simple, with no emotional strings attached. At least that's what I told myself. I called my mother back 3 weeks after that initial conversation. Her voice was wary when she answered, probably expecting another rejection. "I've been thinking about the house situation," I said, keeping my tone businesslike. "I'm not going to loan you money or co-sign anything, but I am willing to buy the house from you. Market value, cash sale, quick closing. You'll walk away with enough to pay off the mortgage and have some money left over to start fresh somewhere smaller." The silence on the other end was deafening. I could hear my father's voice in the background asking what was happening. When my mother finally responded, she sounded confused, almost suspicious. "You want to buy our house?" she repeated, as if she couldn't quite process what I was saying. I explained the practical aspects, how it would save their credit, give them a financial cushion, allow them to move somewhere more affordable. I didn't mention the emotional aspects, the poetic justice of me owning the house that had never felt like mine, the power shift that this transaction represented. We met with a real estate agent the following week. My parents, Marcus, and me, all sitting around a conference table in a Century 21 office in Cleveland. It was the most time we had spent together in years, and the atmosphere was thick with unspoken tension. My mother looked older than I remembered, tired in a way that went beyond just physical exhaustion. My father seemed defeated, agreeing to everything with minimal comment. Marcus kept glancing at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Maybe respect, maybe resentment, maybe just confusion about how his older brother had ended up in this position of power. The paperwork moved quickly. I was a cash buyer with excellent credit and no contingencies, which made me the ideal purchaser from the bank's perspective. 6 weeks later, we gathered at a title company office for the closing. I signed document after document, transferring hundreds of thousands of dollars that represented years of hard work and careful saving. My parents signed their documents with shaking hands, officially giving up ownership of the house they had lived in for 25 years. When it was done, when the keys were officially mine, I sat in my car in the parking lot and stared at them. These small pieces of metal represented so much more than just access to a building. They represented vindication, independence, the final severing of any obligation I might have felt to people who had never truly considered my needs. I had bought my childhood home, and in doing so, I had somehow freed myself from it. My parents moved out on a gray Saturday in early June. I didn't help them pack or load the moving truck. That felt like crossing a line I wasn't ready to cross. Instead, I showed up after they had left, walking through the empty rooms of the house that now legally belonged to me. The silence was profound. Every footstep echoed off the bare walls, and I could see the outlines on the floors where furniture had sat for decades. The living room still had the indent from my father's recliner. The kitchen linoleum was worn in front of the sink where my mother had stood washing dishes for 25 years. I climbed the stairs slowly, running my hand along the banister that I had touched thousands of times as a child. At the top, I paused before entering what had been my room. The door was open, and I could see that Marcus had left it relatively clean. The walls were still painted the blue color my parents had chosen when we first moved in, though now they were marked with tape residue and nail holes from his posters. I stood in the center of the room in the exact spot where my bed used to be and tried to feel something: triumph, closure, vindication. But mostly I just felt tired. The basement was worse. My old space down there still had the same musty smell, the same tiny windows near the ceiling. Someone had left an old desk lamp behind, and I picked it up, remembering all those cold nights studying for my SATs. I had been so angry back then, so determined to escape. And I had escaped. I had built an entire life based on that determination. But standing there now, holding that lamp, I realized that carrying all that resentment for 10 years had been its own kind of prison. Over the next few months, I renovated the house. I hired contractors to update the kitchen, refinish the floors, paint every room. I replaced the old furnace, upgraded the electrical system, modernized the bathrooms. Every improvement erased a little more of the house I remembered and created something new. The basement became a proper living space with egress windows and modern lighting. Nothing like the cold, dark room I had been forced into. My old bedroom became a home office, neutral and professional, with no trace of the teenager who had felt so displaced. I decided to rent the house rather than sell it immediately. A young family, a couple with 2 small children, moved in that fall. They were thrilled with the space, especially the updated kitchen and the backyard with its old oak tree. I met them once at the lease signing, and the wife mentioned how perfect the upstairs bedroom would be for their oldest daughter. I smiled and nodded, not sharing the history of that particular room. It was their home now, their story to write. My relationship with my parents remained distant but civil. They had moved to a small apartment across town, downsizing dramatically from the house they had lost. My father eventually found work again, though at a lower salary than before. My mother seemed diminished somehow, less certain of herself, less quick to make pronouncements about what everyone else should do. We saw each other at holidays, brief visits that were polite but superficial. The elephant in the room, the house, the sale, everything that had led to that moment, was never directly discussed. Marcus surprised me. About a year after the sale, he reached out and asked if we could meet for coffee. We sat in a Starbucks near his community college, and he was more mature than I had given him credit for. He apologized for taking my room all those years ago, said he had been too young to understand what it meant but that he got it now. He told me that our parents never talked about the house, that they had forbidden him from bringing it up, as if pretending it hadn't happened would somehow erase the reality. "I think Mom knows she messed up," Marcus said, stirring his coffee absently. "Not just with the room but with how she treated you all those years. She just can't admit it." We talked for over an hour, and I found myself genuinely liking this younger brother I barely knew. He wasn't the entitled teenager I had resented. He was just a kid who had been caught in the middle of family dysfunction, same as me. Before we parted, he asked if he could come see the house sometime, just to see what I had done with it. I told him maybe someday when I was ready. The years continued to pass. I got promoted again at work, becoming a senior project manager overseeing major commercial developments across the Midwest. I dated seriously for the first time, a woman named Sarah who worked in urban planning. We moved in together after a year into a larger apartment downtown with a view of the river. Life was good, better than I could have imagined during those basement days. The rental house provided steady income and continued to appreciate in value, but I rarely thought about it beyond the monthly property management reports. Then last month something shifted. I was at my parents' apartment for a rare dinner visit, and I saw my mother looking through old photo albums. There were pictures of me as a child in that house. Birthday parties in the backyard, Christmas mornings in the living room, me doing homework at the kitchen table. She didn't know I was watching, and the expression on her face was one of pure loss. Not just for the house but for something larger. For time, for relationships that had fractured, for words that could never be taken back. I realized in that moment that holding on to the house had become its own kind of burden. I had bought it as a statement, as proof that I had overcome their rejection, as tangible evidence of my success. But keeping it felt like keeping a wound open, maintaining a connection to pain that I no longer needed to carry. The house had served its purpose. It had taught me about resilience, about building something from nothing, about the importance of creating your own security. But I didn't need to own it forever to prove those lessons had stuck. I listed the house for sale 2 weeks ago. The market is strong and I've already received multiple offers above asking price. The young family that's been renting wants to buy it, which feels right somehow, that this house that caused so much disruption in my childhood might provide stability for someone else's children. I'll walk away with a substantial profit, money that Sarah and I plan to use as a down payment on our own house, a place we'll choose together with no ghosts or old resentments attached. My mother doesn't know yet that I'm selling. I'm not sure how she'll react when she finds out, or if she'll react at all. Maybe she'll see it as another rejection, more evidence that I've moved on from the family. Or maybe she'll understand that some chapters need to close completely before new ones can truly begin. Either way, her reaction isn't what matters most anymore. I've stopped waiting for the apology that will probably never come, stopped needing validation from people who don't know how to give it. Looking back now, I can see the strange gift in that long-ago humiliation. Being forced out of my room, being made to feel unwelcome in my own home, pushed me to build something better, something entirely mine. If my mother had never made that choice, would I have worked so hard to escape? Would I have been so driven to create financial security? Would I have learned so young that you can't rely on anyone else to protect your interests? Probably not. I would have stayed comfortable, stayed dependent, stayed small. The irony of selling the house that was never truly mine, even when my name was on the deed, isn't lost on me. In the end, it was just a building, just wood and brick and memories. Some good, many painful. The real home I needed to build was internal. A sense of self-worth that didn't depend on anyone else's approval, a security that came from my own efforts, a life constructed on my own terms. That home I carry with me everywhere and no one can ever take it away. The closing is scheduled for next month. I'll sign the papers, transfer the deed, and walk away from that house for the final time. And when I do, I'll be walking towards something new, something built not on resentment or the need to prove anything, but on genuine hope for the future. Life has its ironies indeed, but sometimes the greatest irony is discovering that the thing you thought you wanted most, revenge, vindication for others to see what they did wrong, isn't actually what sets you free. What sets you free is letting go, moving forward, and recognizing that the best revenge is simply living well. I've learned that home isn't a place someone can give you or take away. Home is what you build for yourself, brick by brick, choice by choice, day by day. And mine, the one that really matters, has been under construction for 10 years. It's finally finished and it's beautiful.